I can feel the gravel biting into my cheek. 47 degrees in the shade, but the ground burns like a skillet. I'm face down in an Afghan alley, and I can hear them. Boots on stone, metal scraping metal, voices in Pashto getting closer. My radio is dead. My rifle is 3 feet away, might as well be 3 miles. There's blood running down my left arm, but I don't remember getting hit. My heart is hammering so hard I think they'll hear it. Think it'll give me away. Then I hear the distinctive click of an AK-47 safety coming off, and I know they've found me. What I'm about to do goes against every single thing they taught us at Fort Benning. Every instinct screaming at me says I'm about to get myself killed. But 12 minutes ago, I watched this same technique save my life in ways that shouldn't be possible, and the forensic team would later count 63 bullet impacts in a circle around where I'd been standing. 63. Not one touched me. The Army investigators couldn't explain it. My commanding officer couldn't explain it. The Taliban fighters who were there and survived still tell stories about the American who couldn't be killed. But I know exactly why I'm still breathing. It wasn't body armor, it wasn't luck, it wasn't divine intervention. It was something far simpler, something so obvious that everyone missed it, something that a kid from a rough neighborhood in Oakland taught me before I ever put on this uniform. See, when you grow up where I did, you learn that the fastest runner doesn't always escape. Sometimes it's the one who knows when to stop running. My platoon sergeant used to say, "Speed and aggression win firefights." He was wrong. I'm alive because I did the exact opposite. I'm alive because in the middle of that kill zone, with bullets turning the air into a blender of hot metal, I stopped moving completely. Not slowed down. Stopped. Froze like a statue. Went against every survival instinct, every training drill, every combat doctrine. And the Taliban fighters trained to track movement, to lead their targets, to anticipate the next position. They kept firing at where I was going to be, not where I was. 63 bullets, 63 calculations, 63 predictions. All wrong. But right now, face down in this alley with them closing in, I'm about to find out if it works twice, because this time, they know I'm here. This time, there's nowhere to run. This time, the only thing between me and a body bag is whether I can make them see me wrong one more time. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm 35 years old. I shouldn't be here to tell you this story. Let me explain why I am. If my story resonates with you, please hit the like button to bring a little light to this father's heart. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my upcoming life stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is there right now. It makes me so happy to know what corner of the country or world you're listening from. I was 23 years old when they sent me to Kandahar province, just another infantry specialist in the 101st Airborne, just another kid from Oakland who joined up because college wasn't in the cards and my neighborhood was eating people alive. Before Afghanistan, I'd never fired a weapon outside of training. Never been in a real firefight, never watched someone die. The year was 2012, and we were supposed to be transitioning authority to Afghan forces, supposed to be winding down. But Kandahar didn't get that memo. The Taliban were pushing back hard, and our battalion was conducting daily patrols through villages where every corner could hide an ambush. I remember my first week in country. This veteran sergeant pulled me aside. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, 20 years in, 3 deployments. He looked at me with these tired eyes and said, "Chen, in a firefight, you move fast and you move aggressive. You freeze up, you die. Speed is life." I nodded. Made sense. That's what they taught us at Benning. That's what every combat manual says. Keep moving. Make yourself a hard target. Use speed and violence of action. I believed it completely. I had no reason not to. But what nobody told me was that the Taliban had read the same manuals, watched the same training videos, studied the same tactics. They knew how Americans fought. They knew we'd been taught to move, to rush, to be aggressive, and they'd learned to anticipate it. That's what made September 15th, 2012 possible. That's what turned a routine patrol into the day that should have killed me. That's what led to 63 bullets and 0 hits. The valley we were patrolling was called the Arghandab River Valley, but we had other names for it. The Meat Grinder, the Funnel of Death, Taliban Central. In 2012, this 30-mile stretch of river valley saw more IED strikes and ambushes than almost anywhere else in Afghanistan. The stats were brutal. In the previous 6 months, coalition forces had taken over 200 casualties in this region alone. The terrain made it perfect for ambushes, narrow roads flanked by mud brick walls, orchards that provided cover, compounds with multiple escape routes. Every patrol felt like walking into a trap. You just didn't know when it would spring. I grew up in East Oakland, in a neighborhood where you learned to read danger before you could read books. My mum worked 2 jobs trying to keep me and my sister fed. My dad wasn't in the picture. By the time I was 16, I'd lost 3 friends to gang violence. I knew what it felt like to be hunted, to walk streets where any car could be a threat, where any corner could be your last. I thought I understood violence. I thought I understood survival. Afghanistan taught me I'd only seen the preview. Our platoon was 33 guys, most of us in our early 20s, led by Lieutenant Morrison, who was all of 25 and fresh from Ranger School. We'd been in country for 6 weeks, running the same patrol routes, checking the same compounds, talking to the same village elders who smiled and told us nothing. The September heat was starting to ease, which meant fighting season was ramping up. The Taliban liked to hit us during the cooler months, and intelligence said they were massing fighters in our area. My job was simple: walk the patrol line, watch for IEDs, respond to contact. Standard infantry stuff. But I'd noticed something in those first 6 weeks that bothered me. During our few firefights, whenever contact started, guys would immediately start moving. Combat bounds, rushes from cover to cover, exactly like we'd been taught. And the Taliban didn't seem surprised at all. They'd spray fire at our next position before we even got there, like they knew where we were going. One time I watched Corporal Stevens take fire while moving between 2 walls. He did everything right, kept low, moved fast, zigzagged. The bullets tracked him the entire way. He made it, but only because the shooter missed. But the shooter had been aiming at the right spots. I mentioned it to Rodriguez one night. "Sarge, you ever notice how they seem to know where we're going?" He looked at me like I'd suggested we start using magic. "That's why you move fast, Chen. Don't give them time to adjust." But that wasn't what I was seeing. They weren't adjusting. They were anticipating, predicting. I kept thinking about something from back home. There was this kid, maybe 13, who used to snatch phones in Oakland. He was incredible at it. You'd never see him coming. One day I asked him how he did it. He said, "People move in patterns. They reach for their phone the same way every time. I don't watch where their hand is. I watch where it's going to be." The Taliban weren't watching where we were. They were watching where we were going to be. Our movement patterns were predictable because they were standard, by the book, professional, and therefore readable. September 15th started like any other patrol. 05:30 wake-up, MRE breakfast that tasted like cardboard in gravy form, gear check, briefing from Morrison. We were going to patrol through the village of Jari, check 3 compounds, talk to the Malik, be back by noon. Simple stuff. 8 of us on patrol: Morrison, Rodriguez, Stevens, Washington, Martinez, O'Brien, Thompson, and me. We rolled out at 0600 in 2 MRAPs, dropped at the village edge, started the foot patrol. The village was quiet. Too quiet, but it was always too quiet. Kids watched us from doorways. Women vanished inside compounds. Men sat in tea shops and looked through us like we were ghosts. We'd done this 100 times. Checked the first compound, clear. Second compound, clear. I was pulling rear security, watching our 6 when I felt it. That same feeling from Oakland when you knew something was about to pop off. The air gets thicker, sounds get sharper, time slows down just a hair. I opened my mouth to say something to Rodriguez when the first shot cracked past my head. Then the world exploded. Gunfire from 3 directions. AK fire, PKM machine gun, maybe an RPK light machine gun. Rounds hitting the mud walls around us, kicking up dust. That distinctive snap crack of bullets breaking the sound barrier right next to your head. Morrison was yelling on the radio. Rodriguez was directing fire. O'Brien was putting rounds downrange. And we were moving, exactly like we'd been taught. Bounding back toward better cover, alternating movement, covering each other. Textbook, professional, predictable. I watched Thompson start his bound from one wall to another, maybe 20 feet. The machine gun tracked him. I could see the dust impacts walking up the ground toward where he was running, where he would be in 2 seconds. He dove, rolled, made it behind cover. Inches. Martinez went next. Same thing. The fire anticipated his movement. He made it, but barely. They were reading us. Every move we made, they'd already calculated. We were doing everything right, and it was almost getting us killed. That's when my brain made a connection it shouldn't have. That phone snatcher kid. The Taliban shooting where we were going to be. The way predators track prey by watching movement patterns. And something my uncle had told me years ago when he was teaching me to play pool. Sometimes the best shot is the one where you don't move the cue ball at all. I was behind a low wall, rounds hitting above my head, spraying me with bits of mud brick. Stevens was next to me, breathing hard. "Chen, you're up. Bound to that compound entrance, 30 feet. I looked at the distance, looked at where the machine gun was firing from. Did the math in my head. If I moved fast, if I combat bounded like we were taught, I'd be crossing open ground for maybe 4 seconds. The gunner had our pattern now. He'd lead me. He'd aim at where I'd be halfway through, compensate for my speed. He'd been watching us for 3 minutes. He knew our tempo. But what if I changed the equation? What if I gave him a calculation he couldn't solve? "Chen, move!" Rodriguez was screaming. I stood up, didn't bound, didn't rush, didn't zigzag. I stood up in full view and I stopped moving, completely still, like a statue, like a target. Every instinct was screaming. Every nerve was firing. My muscles were locked in position not because I was brave, but because I was more terrified of moving than staying still. The machine gun fire tracked to where I should have been if I'd started running. The bullets hit the ground 8 feet to my right. The gunner corrected, swung back toward me, but I still wasn't moving, wasn't giving him a vector to calculate, wasn't providing the prediction his brain needed. He fired again. The rounds went 3 feet to my left. He was aiming at where I was about to go, except I wasn't about to go anywhere. 2 seconds of total stillness, the longest 2 seconds of my life. Then I moved, not to the compound entrance Stevens had indicated, but backward, back to the wall I'd just left. Moved fast, but only for 3 feet, dropped back to cover. The machine gun fire hit where I would have been if I'd gone forward. Hit exactly the spot most soldiers would have moved to. Hit empty air. Rodriguez was staring at me. What the hell was that? I didn't answer because I didn't know if I could explain it. Didn't know if it had been genius or suicide. Didn't know if it would ever work again. But I knew one thing. For 2 seconds, I'd been standing in the open, and the Taliban machine gunner had missed me not because of body armor or luck or cover, but because I'd made him aim at a target that didn't exist. I'd made him shoot at the pattern instead of the person. That's when Morrison called for air support, and we started our fighting withdrawal back to the pickup point. And that's when the real test began, because the Taliban weren't done with us, not even close. The withdrawal was chaos. We were moving through narrow alleys trying to put distance between us and the ambush site. Air support was 20 minutes out. 20 minutes is an eternity in a firefight. The Taliban knew we were pulling back, and they were trying to cut us off, push us into a kill zone. I could hear them moving parallel to us, boots slapping stone, voices coordinating. We turned a corner and there they were, 6 fighters, maybe 70 feet away, raising their weapons. No cover between us and them, just open alley. This should have been where half our patrol died. Morrison started giving orders, but I wasn't listening. I was already moving forward, directly at them, and then I stopped. Froze mid-stride. Full exposure. Standing in the middle of the alley like I was waiting for a bus. The Taliban fighters opened fire. I felt the air moving around me, felt the heat of bullets passing, felt one tug at my sleeve. But they were shooting at where I would be if I kept moving forward. They were leading their targets like hunters do, compensating for momentum I'd already killed. Their brains couldn't process someone moving into fire and then stopping. It violated every combat instinct. Prey runs away. Threats advance. Nothing stands still in the kill zone. I counted 3 seconds standing there. 3 seconds while my squad found angles and returned fire. 3 seconds while Stevens put down one fighter and Washington dropped another. Then I moved again. Not forward, not back, but laterally. 3 quick steps to my right and dropped prone. The remaining Taliban fire tracked to where I'd been standing, tracked to where any soldier would have continued to, forward toward cover or backward toward safety. Hit nothing but air. Martinez later told me it looked like I was glitching, like a video game character with a bad connection. Move, freeze, move, freeze. Unpredictable positions, broken rhythm. It went against everything that should work. But it was working. We cleared that alley and kept moving, Taliban still harassing us from parallel streets. Every time they got an angle on us, every time someone had to cross open space, I volunteered. And every time I did the same thing, moved into the danger, then killed all momentum. Became a statue. Let them shoot at predictions instead of positions. The squad thought I'd lost my mind. Rodriguez kept trying to pull me back. "Chen, you're going to get yourself killed. Stop freezing up." But I wasn't freezing up. I was doing the opposite of freezing. Freezing is panic, paralysis, losing control. I was choosing stillness, weaponizing it, making it work for me instead of against me. By the time we reached the pickup point, we'd been in contact for 18 minutes. Air support arrived and scattered the Taliban fighters. We loaded into the MRAPs and rolled back to base. Nobody was killed. 3 minor wounds, including the graze on my arm I'd barely noticed. Should have been a massacre, should have been a disaster. Was instead a successful contact, but when we got back to base, that's when things got weird. The debrief was standard at first. Morrison gave his report, everyone gave their accounts. Then the lieutenant said something that made my blood cold. The forensic team is going back to the site tomorrow to map the engagement. Initial drone footage is showing something unusual with the bullet impacts. I didn't think much of it at the time. Went to the aid station, got my arm cleaned up, barely a scratch. Went to the chow hall, forced down some food. Tried to sleep but kept seeing that moment in the alley, kept feeling the bullets passing, kept wondering how close I'd actually come. Next morning I was called to the TOC, the Tactical Operations Center. Morrison was there, Rodriguez, and a captain from Battalion Intelligence I'd never met. On the screen was drone footage of the alley from yesterday. Thermal imaging showing heat signatures, then regular footage showing the positions. The captain looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Specialist Chen, we've completed the ballistic analysis of yesterday's engagement, specifically the moments when you were exposed in the open." He clicked to a new slide. It was a photo of the alley taken from ground level. Marked on the ground, on the walls, everywhere around where I'd been standing, were small flags, red flags, marking bullet impacts. I counted them, 63. The captain zoomed in. "Every one of these impacts occurred while you were stationary in this position. The distribution pattern is unusual. They form almost a perfect circle around your position, with a median distance of 18 inches from your center mass. The closest impact was 7 inches from your left boot. The furthest was 32 inches from your right shoulder." He paused. "In 20 years of combat forensics, I've never seen anything like this. It's as if every Taliban fighter was simultaneously missing you by the exact same margin. Not random spray and pray, calculated misses." Rodriguez was staring at the screen. "That's impossible. Nobody's that lucky." But the captain shook his head. "It's not luck, Sergeant. Look at the angles of impact. Look at the trajectories. They're not missing him. They're missing where they predicted he would be. The targeting is actually extremely precise, for a target that was moving, but Specialist Chen wasn't moving." He turned to me. "You want to explain what you were doing out there?" I told them. Told them about the phone snatcher in Oakland, about watching how the Taliban tracked our movement patterns, about the theory that stillness would break their targeting solution, about making the conscious choice to become unpredictable by becoming perfectly predictable, predictably motionless. Morrison looked skeptical. "That's insane. You're saying you survived by making yourself a stationary target?" "No, sir. I survived by making them shoot at a moving target that wasn't moving anymore. Their brains expected movement. They led their shots, but there was nothing to lead." The captain was nodding slowly. "It's actually consistent with combat psychology. The human brain is hardwired to track motion. Hunters don't aim at where the prey is, they aim at where it will be. In modern combat, that instinct is reinforced by training. Lead your target, predict the movement, fire where they're going. Specialist Chen essentially exploited a cognitive bias. He became a target their training wouldn't allow them to shoot accurately. Rodriguez wasn't buying it. That's a one-time fluke. You try that again, you're dead. But I'd been thinking about that all night. Thinking about the pattern I'd seen. The way it had worked not just once but multiple times in that firefight. The way the Taliban had consistently missed because they were consistently predicting. Sergeant, respectfully, they missed me 63 times. That's not a fluke. That's a pattern. Their pattern. And if we understand it, we can use it. The captain leaned back in his chair. Battalion is going to want this documented. We might want to test this under controlled conditions. Morrison cut him off. With respect, sir, we're not using my soldiers as test subjects for experimental tactics. Chen got lucky. We're not building doctrine around luck. And that should have been the end of it. Should have been a weird story we told in the talk. A strange statistical anomaly. A tale for the end of deployment. But war doesn't work like that. War has a way of testing your theories whether you want it to or not. 3 days later, we were back on patrol. Different village, same valley, same Taliban territory. Intel said a high-value target was in the area, a Taliban commander who'd been organizing the ambushes. We were part of a larger operation, 4 squads moving in from different directions, trying to box him in. It was supposed to be a quick hit, in and out before they could organize. Should have known better. We were 2 clicks into the patrol when the IED went off. Not under our vehicles, we were on foot. It detonated behind us, cutting off our route back, part of a coordinated ambush. Then the shooting started. This time, though, it was different. This wasn't harassment fire or a quick ambush. This was a sustained engagement. They wanted us pinned, wanted us stuck in that village until reinforcements couldn't reach us before dark. They'd learned from last time. The volume of fire was incredible. Multiple machine guns, lots of AK fire, at least 1 RPG. We took cover in a compound, started returning fire. But we were in a bad position. 3 sides exposed, limited ammunition, no vehicles, air support delayed because of operations elsewhere. Morrison was on the radio trying to coordinate with the other squads, but they were all in contact too. This was bigger than we'd expected. Battalion was saying help was coming, but it would be 45 minutes minimum. 45 minutes. We didn't have 45 minutes. The Taliban were maneuvering, trying to get angles on our position. I could see them moving between buildings, setting up crossfire. In 10 minutes, maybe 15, they'd have us in an impossible position. Someone had to do something, had to break their momentum, had to disrupt their plan. Rodriguez looked at me. Didn't say anything, didn't need to. I knew what he was thinking because I was thinking it too. Maybe the thing that worked last time could work again. Maybe. Or maybe last time was luck, and this time would be a bullet in the chest. Only one way to find out. I'm going to move to that wall, I said, pointing to a position about 40 feet away that would give us a better angle on one of the machine gun positions. Give me covering fire, Rodriguez nodded. The squad opened up, putting rounds downrange, trying to suppress the Taliban position. I stood up, moved out of cover, started crossing the open space. 5 steps in, I stopped, completely still, standing in the open while gunfire lit up the air around me. The machine gun swung toward me, opened fire. I watched the impacts hit the ground to my left, where I would have been if I'd kept running, watched them adjust right, tracking the movement that wasn't happening, 7 feet away, 5 feet, 3 feet, but not hitting me, because they were shooting at where their training told them I would be, not where I actually was. I could hear Rodriguez screaming, but I couldn't make out the words over the gunfire. 5 seconds of stillness, 5 seconds of being a target. Then I moved again, but backward, 3 steps, back toward the compound. The machine gun fire tracked forward, to where any rational soldier would have moved to complete their bound. Hit empty ground. I made it back to the compound and dropped behind cover. My hands were shaking. My breath was coming in gasps. But I'd learned something important. It worked twice. That meant it wasn't luck. That meant it was a technique, a tactic, a tool that could be used. Rodriguez grabbed my shoulder. You're insane. You know that. Maybe, but I was alive. And more importantly, I'd bought us time. The Taliban were confused now, hesitating. I could see them repositioning, trying to figure out what the hell I was doing. That hesitation gave our squad time to establish better fields of fire, time for Stevens to line up a shot that took out one of the machine gunners, time for Washington to call in more accurate grid coordinates for artillery support. 5 minutes later, the first artillery rounds hit, scattering the Taliban fighters. 10 minutes after that, reinforcements arrived. We'd held, we'd survived, and I'd used the technique again. Different context, same results. Stillness as a weapon. Predictability as protection. Word started spreading, not officially because Morrison still wasn't convinced this was anything but dangerous luck, but soldiers talk, other squads heard about it, about the guy who stood still in the middle of firefights and didn't get hit, about the 63 bullets, about the technique that shouldn't work but did. They started calling me statue. Some guys said it with respect, others said it with skepticism. A few said it with the kind of tone that meant they thought I was going to get someone killed. But the Taliban heard about it too, and that's when things got really interesting. Because the Taliban weren't stupid. They were experienced fighters, many with decades of combat experience. They studied their enemies, adapted, learned, and they'd noticed something impossible happening in their territory. Intel started picking up chatter, radio intercepts, conversations between Taliban fighters. One of our interpreters brought a report to the daily briefing 2 weeks after the second engagement. "Sir, they're talking about an American who can't be killed. They're saying he stands in Allah's protection, that bullets refuse to strike him, that he's protected by jinn." Morrison looked skeptical, but the interpreter continued. "They're warning their fighters about him, telling them not to shoot him because it wastes ammunition and breaks morale. They think he's using black magic or American technology that deflects bullets." Rodriguez laughed. "Black magic? That's rich." But I wasn't laughing, because I understood what this meant. The Taliban were building a legend around me, and legends have power. Psychological power. In a war where morale and belief matter as much as bullets and bombs, the Taliban had just made me into something more than a soldier. They'd made me into a fear, into a mystery, into something that couldn't be explained by their understanding of how combat worked. And fear is contagious. More reports came in, Taliban fighters refusing to engage if they thought I was on patrol. Some fighters reportedly throwing down their weapons and retreating when they saw the American, who moved like a ghost and stood like a stone. It sounded like propaganda, like exaggeration, until the day 3 Taliban fighters surrendered specifically to our patrol. Not because they were cornered, not because they were injured. They walked out of a compound with their hands up, specifically asking for protection from the unkillable one. Through the interpreter, they said their commander had ordered them to set up an ambush on our patrol route. But when they saw me in the patrol, they refused. Their commander threatened them, so they surrendered instead, preferred American captivity to facing whatever magic or technology I possessed. Morrison pulled me aside after that. "Chen, this is getting out of hand. Sir, with respect, it's working in our favor. They're afraid. Fear saves lives. Fear also makes people unpredictable. A scared enemy might do something stupid, might use different tactics, might go after you specifically." He was right to be concerned, because the Taliban leadership wasn't just scared. They were angry, and they were planning something. The intelligence came through on October 23, 2012. NSA had intercepted a communication from a senior Taliban commander in our area. He was organizing something specific, an operation focused on one target: me. The brief was classified, but Morrison made sure I was there for it. The intelligence officer laid it out. "The Taliban are calling this Operation Ghost Hunter. They've brought in a sniper team from Pakistan, fighters with experience against American forces. Their specific mission is to kill or capture Specialist Chen. They believe taking him out will restore morale and prove he's not protected by supernatural forces." The room was quiet. Rodriguez finally spoke. "How credible is this intel?" "Very. Multiple intercepts, multiple sources. They're serious about this. They're committing significant resources." Morrison looked at me. "Chen, we can pull you off patrol rotation, put you on base security until this blows over." I thought about it. Thought about the 3 Taliban fighters who'd surrendered rather than face me. Thought about the psychological advantage we'd gained. Thought about my squad mates who went out on patrol every day regardless of threats. Sir, if we change our pattern because of this, we're telling them the legend isn't true. We're telling them I can be scared off. That defeats the whole purpose. The whole purpose is staying alive, Specialist. The whole purpose is winning, sir. And we're winning. They're afraid we can't give that up. Morrison studied me for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but we're changing how we patrol. Random routes, random times, no patterns they can exploit, and you stay in the middle of the formation, not on point or rear security. I agreed, but I knew it wouldn't matter. If the Taliban wanted me specifically, they'd find a way. The question was whether the technique would work against someone who was specifically prepared for it, against someone who knew what I would do, against someone who was hunting me instead of just reacting to me. I didn't have to wait long to find out. 3 days later, we were on patrol in a village called Khosrow. Mid-morning, routine security check. I was in the middle of the patrol like Morrison had ordered, surrounded by my squad. We were moving through a narrow street, compounds on both sides, when I felt it again. That feeling. The one from Oakland that said something was wrong. I opened my mouth to call a halt when the bullet hit. Not me, Martinez. He went down hard, blood spreading across his shoulder. Single shot, precise, professional. Sniper! Rodriguez's voice. Everyone scattered to cover, medic up to treat Martinez. Return fire going toward the direction of the shot, but no target visible. This was different from the ambushes. This was calculated, patient, professional. This was someone who'd been trained, not just to shoot, but to hunt. Morrison was on the radio calling it in, organizing a response. But I knew what this was. Ghost hunter. They'd found me. The sniper fired again. The bullet hit the wall 6 inches from O'Brien's head. Another precise shot. This wasn't spray and pray. This was someone who knew what they were doing. We were pinned. The sniper had an elevated position, probably a rooftop or upper window, had clear sight lines on our position. We couldn't move without exposing ourselves. Air support was being scrambled but would take time. The sniper was patient, taking shots when we exposed ourselves, keeping us locked down, smart, professional, waiting for the right opportunity, waiting for me to move, because that's why he was here, not to rack up kills, to kill one specific American, to kill the legend. I looked at my position, looked at the angles, looked at where the sniper had to be based on the bullet trajectories, did the math. The technique had worked against ambushes, against machine gunners, against fighters who were reacting in the moment. But would it work against someone who was prepared, someone who knew what I might do, someone who'd studied me? Only one way to find out. And if I was wrong, if it didn't work this time, I wouldn't get a chance to learn from the mistake. I caught Rodriguez's eye, pointed to a position across the street, maybe 25 feet away. That would give us an angle on where I thought the sniper was positioned. Rodriguez shook his head violently. No way. That's a suicide run. He's watching that gap. I know. Chen, trust me, Sarge. I didn't wait for an answer. Stood up. Stepped into the open. The sniper fired immediately. Professional, fast, exactly on target. But the target was moving. I was 3 steps into my run when I stopped. The bullet hit the wall behind me, exactly where I would have been if I'd taken one more step, exactly where any soldier running at full speed would have been. The sniper adjusted instantly. Professional, trained, good at his job, fired again. But I still wasn't moving. Was standing completely still in the middle of the street. The second bullet hit the ground 5 feet ahead of me, where I would be if I'd continued my run. The sniper was doing everything right, leading the target, compensating for speed and distance, calculating where I would be. But I was breaking his calculation by removing the variable he needed, the movement. I could almost feel his confusion through the scope. I'd been running. Targets that are running continue to run, toward cover, toward concealment, toward safety. They don't stop in the open. It violated every pattern, every training scenario, every combat experience he'd built his skills on. 3 seconds of stillness. 3 seconds of being a perfect target for someone who is trained to shoot moving targets. Then I moved again, not forward to the cover I'd been running toward, but at an angle, 3 quick steps to my left, and dropped prone. The sniper fired. The bullet hit where I would have been if I'd continued forward, hit the space that should have contained my center mass, hit nothing. I was prone now, but I had an angle. Could see the muzzle flash from the upper window of a compound 50 meters out. Called it to Rodriguez. Stevens put rounds on the window. The sniper displaced, had to move, lost his perfect position. That's when our air support arrived. Apache helicopter, main gun lighting up the compound, forcing the sniper to break contact and run. We swept the compound 15 minutes later, found the hide site, found the expended brass, found something else too, a notebook. The interpreter translated it while we were still on site. It was the sniper's observation log. Pages of notes about American patrol patterns, specific notes about me, sketches of my movement technique, questions written in the margins. Why does he stop? Is it training or fear? How to predict unpredictable? On the last page, written in English, "The ghost is real." We never found the sniper. He'd escaped in the confusion after the Apache arrived, but we didn't need to find him because something more important had happened. The technique had worked against someone who was specifically prepared for it, who had studied it, who had planned for it. It had worked because no amount of preparation can account for someone who does the exact opposite of what survival instinct demands. The Taliban sniper had been good, probably the best shooter they had. Trained, experienced, professional, but he'd been trained to shoot targets that behave like targets, and I'd refused to play that role. Martinez survived, by the way. Shoulder wound, clean through, no permanent damage. He was evac to Bagram and eventually back to Germany. Before he left, he said something to me that stuck. "Chen, what you did out there was the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. Haven't decided which." "Maybe both," I said. "Yeah, maybe both." After the sniper incident, something shifted. The Taliban stopped trying to kill me and started trying to avoid me. Patrols I was on encountered significantly less contact. When we did make contact, the firefights were shorter, less intense. The enemy would break contact faster, disengage sooner. It was like they decided I wasn't worth the ammunition or the psychological cost. Intel kept picking up chatter. They'd given me a new name, not the Ghost anymore. Now I was the American who Allah has marked. Different interpretation, same result. Fighters didn't want to engage. Some interpreted it as I was protected by God. Others interpreted it as I was marked for divine punishment and they shouldn't interfere. Either way, I'd become something between a legend and a curse. Morrison started using me tactically, putting me on patrols that needed the psychological advantage. My presence on a patrol meant we were more likely to complete our mission without significant contact. It was weird, being weaponized not for my shooting, but for my reputation. Rodriguez finally admitted he'd been wrong. "Chen, I thought you were going to get yourself killed. Thought you were just freezing up and getting lucky. But you've turned this into something else. You've turned it into a tool. It's not about me, Sarge. It's about them. They're trained to shoot moving targets, so don't move." It's insane. So is war. Other soldiers started trying to copy the technique. That's when we ran into problems, because what worked for me didn't work for everyone. I watched a private try it during a contact, stood still in the open, took a round in the leg within 2 seconds. The technique required precise timing, reading the enemy's rhythm, understanding exactly when to stop. It required a specific kind of calculation that not everyone could make under fire. Morrison issued an order. No one was to attempt Specialist Chen's technique without specific authorization. It was both a validation, acknowledging the technique was real, and a warning. It was dangerous if done wrong. My deployment was supposed to end in March 2013, but in January, Battalion asked if I'd extend for 3 months. They said my presence was having a measurable impact on mission success rates. I said yes, partly because I believed in the mission, partly because I'd become something bigger than myself and I wanted to see it through, partly because I knew that after this deployment, I'd never be this person again. Back in the States, I'd just be another veteran. But here, for these few months, I was a legend. And legends don't get to choose when their stories end. February 2013. We were on a joint operation with Afghan National Army soldiers, clearing a compound complex where intel said a Taliban cell was hiding weapons. It was supposed to be routine. Should have known better. We'd cleared 3 compounds when the contact started. Not an ambush, a coordinated defense. The Taliban had prepared this position, had fortified it, had decided to make a stand. Multiple fighting positions, interlocking fields of fire, probably 15 to 20 fighters. We were stuck taking fire from multiple positions, unable to advance without taking casualties. The Afghan soldiers with us were pinned down, some talking about pulling back. Morrison was trying to organize a flanking movement, but the geometry wasn't working. Every approach was covered. That's when I saw it. A narrow alley, maybe 4 feet wide, that ran between 2 of the compounds. If someone could get through that alley, they'd be behind the Taliban's main position. Could roll up their line, disrupt their defense. But the alley was a kill zone, 30 feet of total exposure. Any movement through there would be suicide. The Taliban had a machine gun with perfect sightlines. Anyone trying to run that alley would be cut down in seconds. I told Morrison my plan. He looked at me like I'd suggested we surrender. "Chen, that's insane even for you. That alley is a death trap. For someone who moves normally, yes, sir. You can't time this against a machine gun. The volume of fire is too high." "Respectfully, sir, I can, and I think I need to." Morrison studied me for a long moment. "Why?" "Because nobody else can. And if we don't do something, we're going to lose soldiers trying to withdraw under fire. This gives us a chance." He didn't want to say yes. I could see it in his face. But he also couldn't argue with the logic. "All right. But you abort if it's not working. You hear me? First hit, you abort." "Yes, sir." I moved to the entrance of the alley, could see the Taliban machine gun position, could see the gunner tracking back and forth, waiting for someone to try it. Rodriguez came up beside me. "Chen, you've used up a lot of luck." "Not luck, Sarge, math. Same thing in combat." "Maybe, probably. But I was committed now." I stood up, stepped into the alley. The machine gun opened up immediately. Wall of bullets, volume of fire so high it sounded like one continuous roar instead of individual shots. I took 3 running steps and stopped. The fire tracked ahead of me. I stood motionless while rounds tore up the space I would have occupied. 5 steps forward. Stop. The machine gun adjusted, fired where I would be, hit empty air, another 4 steps. Stop. The rhythm was brutal. Each time I moved, each time I stopped, I was gambling that I'd read the gunner's timing correctly, that he was following his training, leading his target, firing at where I was going to be. I was 15 feet into the alley, halfway. The machine gun was desperately trying to adjust, trying to figure out why none of his shots were hitting. I could hear the gunner shouting in Pashto, frustrated, confused, afraid. 3 more steps, stop, I was 20 feet in, almost through. Then the machine gun stopped firing, complete silence for maybe 2 seconds. The gunner was doing what any smart fighter would do, recalculating, changing his approach. When the gun opened up again, he wasn't leading the target anymore. He was firing a wall of bullets across the entire width of the alley, no prediction, just volume, trying to fill the space with so much lead that it didn't matter where I was. That's when I ran. Full sprint, last 10 feet, no stopping, no pausing, because he'd changed the equation. He wasn't shooting at where I would be anymore. He was shooting at where I was. And movement, counterintuitively, was now safer than stillness. I made it through. How? I'm still not sure. The amount of fire he put into that space should have been impossible to survive. But I came out the other side with nothing but a crease in my helmet, where a bullet had kissed it. And now I was behind their line. The next 5 minutes were chaos. I was behind their position. They were focused forward. I had every advantage. I took out the machine gunner first, then started working through their positions, rolling up their line, hitting them from the angle they never expected. Morrison and the squad pushed forward. The Taliban position collapsed. The compound was cleared. We took it with 3 wounded on our side, none critical. Should have been a massacre. Was instead a success. And it was because of a technique that shouldn't work, used against a machine gun that should have killed me, in a situation where any rational tactical manual would say, don't even try. After action debrief, the Afghan army captain we were working with asked me directly, "How did you survive that alley?" I tried to explain. The movement patterns, the prediction, the stillness. He listened, then shook his head. No, that is not possible. Allah protected you. Maybe he was right. I'm not religious, never have been, but I also can't completely explain how I walked through that much fire and came out alive. Math and timing only account for so much. Beyond that, you're left with luck, providence, fate, whatever you want to call the thing that keeps some people breathing when all logic says they should stop. The 63 bullets from September. The sniper's shots that missed by inches. The machine gun in the alley that somehow didn't hit me. Add it all up, and you get either the luckiest soldier in Afghanistan or something else. Something harder to quantify. All I know is that on February 19, 2013, I used the technique for what would be the last time in combat, because 5 days later, my war ended. Not with bullets, with a truck. February 24th, 2013. We were returning from a patrol, riding in an MR-Ape, tired but intact. Another successful day of not dying. We were maybe 2 clicks from base when the IED went off, big one, the kind that's designed to flip armored vehicles. The MRAP went airborne, came down on its side. I don't remember the explosion itself. Memory just cuts from sitting in the vehicle to waking up in the overturned MRAP with blood in my mouth and my left leg bent wrong. Everyone was screaming, from pain, from confusion, from adrenaline. Small arms fire was hitting the vehicle. The Taliban had set up an ambush for the reaction force. We were inside an overturned metal box, injured, disoriented, taking fire. I tried to move, felt my legs scream in protest. Compound fracture, tibia snapped, bone showing through the skin. The medic was working on Rodriguez, who was unconscious and bleeding from a head wound. Morrison was on the radio calling for QRF, Quick Reaction Force. Stevens was returning fire through one of the gun ports. The smoke, the blood, the screaming, the gunfire, it all blended into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I'd survived 63 bullets by standing still, survived a sniper by breaking his predictions, survived a machine gun by reading its rhythm. But I couldn't dodge an IED, couldn't stop a truck from flipping, couldn't technique my way out of physics. The irony wasn't lost on me, even then. I'd become a legend for being unkillable, and now I was lying in my own blood wondering if this was how it ended. Not shot, not in a heroic gunfight, just blown up on a routine patrol 2 weeks before I was supposed to go home. The QRF arrived, beat back the Taliban, extracted us from the vehicle. Rodriguez survived, concussion and lacerations but no permanent damage. 3 others had injuries ranging from minor to serious. We got lucky. The IED could have been bigger. The ambush could have been more organized. We could have all died, but we didn't. At the field hospital, they stabilized my leg, got me on a bird to Bagram, then to Landstuhl in Germany, then Walter Reed in DC. 3 surgeries, 6 months of physical therapy, medical retirement. My war was over. In the hospital, during those long nights when the pain meds wore off and sleep wouldn't come, I'd replay every moment, every firefight, every time I'd used the technique, every bullet that missed. I'd think about the Taliban fighters who'd surrendered rather than face me, about the sniper who'd called me a ghost, about the legend I'd become. And I'd wonder, was it real? Or was I just lucky? Did I actually discover something, some exploit in how human brains process combat? Or was I just a kid from Oakland who survived long enough to become a story? The forensic team counted 63 bullets around my position in that first ambush. 63 shots that missed because I'd stopped moving. That's not luck, that's pattern, that's cause and effect. But the machine gun in the alley, the sniper's rounds that missed by millimeters, all those other moments where death kissed close and then moved on. There's math and then there's something beyond math. I want to tell you I figured it all out. That I can explain exactly why it worked. Why I survived when others didn't. Why the technique was effective. But I can't. Not completely. What I can tell you is this. The human brain is designed to track motion. Hunters know this, predators know this, and soldiers, whether they know it or not, are trained to shoot at movement. When you remove that movement, even for a few seconds, you break the calculation. You become unpredictable by being perfectly predictable. You survive not because you're harder to hit, but because they're shooting at where you aren't. That's the secret. That's the one reason I survived. Not body armor, not air support, not superior firepower, but understanding that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand still. I'm 35 years old now, married, 2 kids, working as a contractor training soldiers in tactical awareness. My left leg still hurts when it rains. I don't sleep great, never have since Afghanistan, probably never will. Sometimes I dream about that alley, about standing still while bullets tear the air apart around me. Sometimes I wake up certain I can hear the snap-crack of rounds passing close. The army never officially adopted the technique. Too dangerous, too dependent on individual timing, too easy to get killed if you do it wrong. Morrison was right about that. But I still teach it in a modified form. I teach soldiers to break their patterns, to be unpredictable, to understand that the enemy is trying to predict their movement. I don't tell them to stand still in the open. That's my story, not theirs. But I teach them the principle behind it. Rodriguez retired too, lives in Texas now. We talk sometimes. He always ends the conversation the same way. You were the craziest soldier I ever served with, and probably the smartest. Maybe both. Probably both. The Taliban fighters I faced, the ones who called me a ghost, the ones who believed I couldn't be killed. I wonder sometimes what they think now. Do they know I was just a kid from Oakland who figured out a trick? Do they know the legend was built on calculation and timing and a lot of terror poorly hidden? Or do they still believe I had some kind of protection, some magic, some divine intervention? I hope they never find out. Because the legend serves a purpose. It says that Americans can be unpredictable, can be impossible, can do things that shouldn't work. And in war, that belief, that psychological space, saves lives. I was asked once by a journalist working on a story about unusual combat tactics if I would do it all again. Stand in the open, break every rule, risk everything on a theory about human perception and movement tracking. I thought about it for a long time before answering. Thought about the 63 bullets. Thought about my squad mates who came home because our patrols encountered less resistance. Thought about the Afghan people who got to live in slightly less violent villages because the Taliban were afraid. Thought about my leg, my nightmares, the price of being a legend. Yes, I told her, I'd do it again. Not because I wanted to be a hero or because I had a death wish, but because it worked. And in war, the only thing that matters is what works. The interviewer asked if I had any advice for soldiers facing impossible situations. I told her what my uncle had told me about pool, what the phone snatcher had shown me in Oakland, what Afghanistan had taught me in the most violent classroom imaginable. Sometimes, I said, the best move is the one no one expects. The shot you don't take, the movement you don't make, the moment of stillness in the middle of chaos. That's where you find your advantage. Not in being faster or stronger or better armed, but in being unpredictable, in breaking the pattern, in standing still when everything in your body is screaming at you to run. 63 bullets around me, and one reason I survived. I chose to stop moving. I chose to break the pattern. I chose to become a target they couldn't hit because I refused to be the target they expected. If you find yourself in an impossible situation, remember this. Sometimes survival isn't about running away from danger. Sometimes it's about standing in the middle of it and refusing to play by the rules that danger expects. The human brain is predictable. Combat is chaos. But in that chaos, if you can find one moment of controlled unpredictability, you can change everything. That's what those 63 bullets taught me. That's what I'm still here to tell you. And that's why, on a Thursday afternoon in September 2012, in an alley in Kandahar province, I stood still while the world tried to kill me and failed. Because I understood something fundamental about how we hunt, how we fight, how we predict. I understood that the deadliest target is the one that refuses to be what you expect. And I'm alive today because I became that target. Alive to tell this story. Alive to remember the soldiers who didn't make it home. Alive to honor the legend that was built on mathematics, terror, and 63 bullets that missed. That's my story. That's what I learned in the worst classroom in the world. And if it helps one person survive one impossible moment, then maybe those 63 bullets meant something. Maybe being a legend for a few months in Afghanistan means something beyond the legend itself. Maybe the one reason I survived can become the reason someone else survives. That's what I hope, that's what I believe, that's what keeps me talking about it, teaching it, remembering it, even when the memories hurt. Because survival is worth the pain of remembering. Always.